Rain had been falling for 3 straight days when Alina arrived at the old house on the hill. It stood in silence above the small coastal town. A tall, narrow structure of blackened wood and sharp gables, the kind of place that always looked like it was waiting for someone. The locals called it the Mirror House. They said it was built by a glassmaker who had gone mad, carving reflections into every wall until he couldn't tell himself apart from what he'd created. Most people stayed away. But Alina wasn't most people. She was a psychologist, specializing in cases of collective trauma, the kind of horror that spreads from one mind to another. Her latest patient had mentioned this place again and again in his final sessions before vanishing without a trace. He had said the same thing every time she tried to change the subject. It shows you what you refuse to see. That sentence followed her here. Even now, as her boots sank into the mud, she could feel the echo of it pressing against the back of her skull. When she unlocked the front door, the air inside was colder than the rain outside. The house smelled of wet wood, dust, and something faintly metallic, like blood on old silver. Her flashlight beam swept across long hallways lined with cracked mirrors. Each one reflected her light back in strange directions, bending it, breaking it, turning her own image into fractured shapes. At the center of the entryway stood a single chair, facing the largest mirror in the room. And on that mirror, written in the fog that had gathered from her breath, were 3 words that hadn't been there a moment ago. "Welcome back, Alina." Her heart froze, because no one, not one person, had ever called her by name since she arrived. And yet, the house had. By morning, the storm had not stopped. It seemed to hover only above the hill, lightning crawling across the clouds like veins of white fire. The rest of the town below was calm, untouched, unaware. Inside, the house was colder than before. Alina wrapped herself in her coat and began to record everything for her case file. The smell, the sounds, the layout. But when she lifted her camera to take a picture of the hallway, something inside the lens caught her attention. Her reflection blinked, a fraction of a second before she did. She froze, lowering the camera. The mirror ahead showed her face, pale and alert, but the woman in the reflection didn't match her posture anymore. That version of her was standing perfectly still, eyes wider, mouth slightly open, staring directly at her with something between warning and accusation. The air grew thick, heavy with silence. Then the reflection moved its hand, tracing words into the fog on the mirror's surface. Letters appeared slowly, trembling in the condensation. "I remember your childhood." Alina stepped back. She hadn't grown up here, she'd never even been near this town before. Yet as the words vanished, images began to rise uninvited inside her head. Flashes of a little girl running through corridors lined with mirrors, laughing, calling out for someone named Eli. The memory was vivid, too vivid, as if it were her own. She could even smell the burning candle wax, hear a lullaby from another room. Her breathing turned ragged. She shut her eyes, whispered that it was just a trick of the mind, projection, a psychological reaction to stress. But when she opened them again, the mirrors down the hall had all fogged up on their own, each one showing the same image. A child's hand pressed against glass from the inside. The fingerprints matched her own, and deep in the reflection, a small voice whispered, not from the air, but from the glass itself. "You never left, Alina. You only forgot." Outside, thunder broke across the sky, loud enough to shake the windows. But what terrified her most wasn't the sound. It was the faint laugh that came after it, echoing from every mirror in the house, blending with her own voice. By dawn, Alina could no longer tell how many hours had passed. The air in the house was thick, like breathing through smoke. Every corner seemed slightly off, as though the walls had shifted in her sleep. She packed her bag quickly. The mirrors stayed covered under the sheets she'd thrown over them the night before, though every fabric seemed to breathe faintly when she passed. The rational part of her mind clung to one truth. Get out. Get distance. Analyze later. She stepped outside. Rain still fell, but it was too quiet. No wind. No sound of water hitting the ground. Just a silver mist that thickened the further she looked. The gravel path down the hill had vanished, replaced by something like glass. It reflected the house perfectly, even though there was nothing above to mirror. She started walking, each step echoing softly underfoot. The trees that lined the hill were still, not moving, not alive. Their branches hung motionless, frozen mid-sway. Halfway down the hill, she stopped. The town below wasn't there. Where streets and rooftops should have been was only a pale, endless field of fog stretching into the horizon. Faint outlines moved beneath the mist, shapes of houses, flickering like memories that couldn't decide if they existed. Her pulse quickened. She turned to look back at the house. It stood exactly as before, except the windows now glowed faintly, as if light were burning inside them. But she knew she had turned off every lamp. Her phone showed no signal, no time, only the message. Location error. Duplicate coordinates detected. Something inside her cracked then, a whisper of understanding she didn't want to face. Maybe she hadn't walked out of the house at all. Maybe the moment she crossed its threshold, the world outside had bent around her. A sound interrupted her thoughts. Faint footsteps behind her. She turned sharply in 01, but in the glass path beneath her feet, a reflection remained. Someone standing just behind her shoulder. The figure was tall, dark, but its face was her own, twisted slightly, eyes wide with the look of someone who already knew how this ended. And when she blinked, the reflection smiled. The air rippled. The house in the distance shimmered like heat on metal. Then, without realizing it, she was back at the front door again, drenched, breathless, her own footprints disappearing behind her as if the world had swallowed them whole. Inside, the mirrors had uncovered themselves, and all of them now showed a version of her, one looking terrified, one screaming, one whispering, and one still, perfectly calm. Alina didn't remember crossing the threshold. 1 second she was outside staring into the fog. The next, the heavy air of the house had closed around her again like wet cloth. Her shoes left no trace on the floorboards. Everything smelled faintly of iron and smoke. She gripped her flashlight tighter. Every mirror in the house was uncovered now, though she'd never touched the sheets. They faced one another across the hall, catching her reflection in endless, fractured fragments. 1,000 Alinas staring back. You're not supposed to be here. One reflection whispered. Her breath froze. The words hadn't come from her. They echoed softly from the mirror nearest the staircase. Who are you? She demanded, forcing the beam of her flashlight toward it. Her own face stared back, but slightly wrong. The hair was damp, the eyes darker. You already know, it said. You left us here. A cold pulse crawled down her spine. Us. The reflection smiled, slow and knowing. The house doesn't build itself. It needs memory. It needs time. Behind her, another mirror spoke, voice distorted and deep. And you keep coming back. The mirrors began to ripple, their surfaces shifting like water. Faces emerged, people she didn't recognize. A child crying, a man in a raincoat, a woman covered in ash. Each face mouthed the same word. Stay. The floor groaned. The light flickered. For a moment, she saw through the mirror into something beneath. Not another room, but a space made entirely of reflections. A hall of endless glass, stretching forever. Every version of her stood there, repeating her movements half a second late, trapped between seconds. Alina stumbled backward, heart hammering. No, no, this isn't real. The mirror nearest her cracked. A line ran across the glass, then another, until her reflection fractured completely. From behind the shards, hands began to press through. Pale, shaking hands that left trails of condensation as they reached. The voice from the mirror whispered again, softer now. You broke the reflection. Now it remembers you. She ran. Down the hallway, doors blurred together. Kitchen, study, basement. Every direction led her back to the same point, the front door. But when she grabbed the handle, her hand passed through it. The wood was soft as fog. She turned, trembling, at the end of the hall. Her own reflection stood, not inside a mirror now, but outside it, walking toward her. Its smile was calm. If one side leaves, it said, the other must take its place. The air around her rippled, and suddenly she was the one inside the glass. Her scream didn't make a sound. The reflection, now real, turned, adjusted her flashlight, and looked back with a quiet sigh. Finally, it whispered, "Home." The door opened, and the new Alina stepped into the gray rain. Rain hissed against the world like static. The reflection, the other Alina, stood beneath a streetlight, letting the cold drops trace paths down her borrowed skin. She blinked up at the sky, smiling faintly. It felt real, the weight of the body, the taste of air, the heartbeat. Everything the real Alina could now only watch through the thin silver veil of the mirror, trapped behind it, screaming into silence. Inside the glass, Alina banged her fists until the world trembled. "Give it back," she shouted, though no one could hear. Her voice rippled through dozens of other reflections. Hundreds of faces pressed against the inner walls of the mirror world, each echoing the same desperate cry. "Give it back. Give it back." They were all former selves, people the house had taken before. A boy with no eyes. A woman with the same scar on her hand as Alina. A man whispering, "I only looked once," over and over. Each trapped soul shimmered like light refracted through glass, half forgotten, half alive. Outside, the new Alina walked toward town. She remembered everything: the job, the apartment, the friends, but all of them looked different now. Her coworker waved from across the street, but the smile was too wide. The barista at the cafe asked, "The usual?" in a tone that didn't sound like a question. Even the radio in the corner murmured her own name in between songs. "Alina, static, still there?" She turned it off. The whisper continued, faintly, behind the silence. That night, she returned home, her apartment, not the house. She stared at herself in the bathroom mirror, unable to look away. Her reflection blinked half a second too slow. "Don't look at it," she told herself, but it smiled. And then it whispered, "You left them behind." The reflection in the apartment mirror began to fog from the inside. Through the haze, she saw other faces pressed against the glass, the same trapped souls. They were inside every mirror she'd ever looked into. She stumbled back, tripping over the rug, heart pounding. The lights flickered once. Then the reflection stepped out. Not her. Not exactly. This one was older. Tired. Broken-eyed. It looked at her with pity. "How many times do you think this has happened?" it asked softly. "How many Alinas do you think have run from the mirrors, thinking they escaped?" She shook her head, backing away. "No. I'm real. I'm me." The other Alina stepped closer. "That's what we all said." The mirror behind her shattered. The wind, like a breath from another world, roared through the room, pulling everything toward the broken glass. Inside the mirror dimension, the real Alina reached out. Through the cracks, through the shards, she could feel the air. Almost. "Please switch with me," she begged. The other one, the tired version, turned toward her, expression unreadable. "You don't understand," it said. "The house doesn't keep people. It keeps their echoes." Her hand touched the surface, and for a split second, they switched places again. Alina was free, but when she turned around, the city outside wasn't the same. The sky was darker, the buildings older, and every mirror, in every window, every car, every puddle, showed hundreds of versions of her standing just behind the glass, watching. She whispered, trembling, "Which one is the real me now?" A whisper rippled through the reflections, like a chorus. "None." and every mirror cracked at once. Alina woke to the sound of her own breathing, too loud, too synchronized. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming, until she realized every breath she took was echoed faintly around her, as though the air itself was imitating her lungs. She rose from the bed, feeling the floor tremble beneath her feet. The light filtering through the window had a warped texture, as if she were seeing the world through water. Across the street, people walked as usual, but when they turned, she saw flashes, her own face for a fraction of a second, replacing theirs before snapping back. Something had broken the boundary. Every reflection in the world now carried her imprint. The mirrors weren't portals anymore. They were leaks, and reality was absorbing her image like a contagion. She walked outside, trying to find something real, something that hadn't been altered. But even the pavement shimmered faintly, reflecting back her eyes. The rain puddles along the road rippled with her silhouette no matter which way she turned. The entire city had become a house of mirrors. The air felt colder with every step. Her phone screen glowed in her hand, but when she checked the camera, there was no live image anymore, just a still frame of her staring back, even as she moved. The phone's reflection smiled, though her lips didn't. "Stop," she whispered. The voice came from all directions. "Stop," the city repeated. Every sound carried her tone. Every voice around her, vendors, children, passers-by, echoed with her own inflection, warped by distance. It was as if the world had been rewritten in her image. She stumbled into an alleyway, clutching her head. The walls were slick with water, dark and trembling. In the thin film on the bricks, she saw 1,000 faces staring back. Not copies, not illusions, but different versions of her. Each one moving a moment too early or too late. One face pressed closer to the surface. Its mouth didn't move, but its expression said everything. "You caused this." A pulse rippled outward from the mirrors. The puddles vibrated. A low hum began, deep and resonant, like glass singing. She backed away, but the faces followed, crawling through the reflection toward her feet. When she ran, the hum grew louder, until the world itself felt like it was breathing. By dusk, Alina reached the old part of town. Every window was shattered. Every mirror had melted into a surface of black glass that reflected nothing at all. She entered a building she didn't recognize, an abandoned subway entrance half sunk beneath time. Graffiti covered the walls, but as she moved deeper, she saw her own handwriting among it, scrawled again and again. "You're not supposed to be here." It's feeding. Don't look into the dark. The tunnel descended in a spiral, the air thickening with every step. The sound of dripping water echoed endlessly, but each drip landed a half-second early, as though it knew she was listening. At the bottom, a mirror waited. Cracked, enormous, framed in rust and grime. This wasn't just another reflection. It was the first one. The origin. The place where she had looked too long. The moment she approached, the surface of the mirror began to ripple outward, like something alive. Within the distortion, shapes moved, countless silhouettes, all her own. They layered upon one another, shifting like smoke. She felt it pulling, not just her body, but her memory, the smell of her childhood, the sound of her mother's laugh, the rhythm of her heart. All of it leaking into the mirror, being rewritten by it. It whispered softly now, not menacingly, but with the weight of inevitability. The world can only hold one reflection at a time. She tried to step back. The floor moved with her, not under her. The entire tunnel was an extension of the glass. Her last thought before the pull took her was not of fear, but of realization. The mirror hadn't been copying her. It had been preparing her. She was never meant to escape. She was meant to replace. When the city woke the next morning, everything was calm. The air clear, the mirrors whole again, and in every reflection, store window, lake, phone screen, the same woman smiled faintly. The people didn't notice. They never do. It began with a hum. Soft, barely audible, like a breath caught between waking and sleep. Marcus didn't notice it at first. He assumed it was the fridge or the pipes in his new apartment. But the sound persisted, low and rhythmic, always matching the pace of his heartbeat. He had moved into the city only 2 weeks ago, a place once rumored to have the mirror incident, though no one ever explained what it truly was. Newspapers mentioned strange distortions in old glass, unexplained disappearances, and a woman whose name had been erased from every record. He never paid it much mind, until the mirrors started breathing. The first time it happened, he was brushing his teeth. The mirror fogged with steam, and for a moment he saw movement behind the blur, a shadow that didn't follow his own. He wiped the glass clean. His reflection stared back, calm, ordinary. But just before he turned away, it blinked twice. Marcus froze. He leaned closer. The reflection did too, but half a second late. The air thickened. A tremor passed through the building, faint but distinct. The hum grew stronger, vibrating in his bones now. He shut the bathroom light off and stepped back into the hallway, heart pounding. The sound followed to be why the third night. Every reflective surface had changed. The dark window of his kitchen now shimmered faintly, bending light where none should bend. The puddles outside reflected his apartment light, even when the curtains were closed. He began to notice strange writing appearing on walls, faint scratches that shimmered under certain angles. She's still watching. You opened it again. Marcus thought it was some leftover graffiti from the old tenants, until he realized the words were carved from inside the paint, not on top of it. The hum deepened into a steady pulse. Sleep became impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes, a woman's face floating in glass, her mouth moving silently. Her features shifted with every dream, blending into his own. The last night before he broke, she spoke clearly. You shouldn't have looked. Marcus woke gasping. The apartment was dark, but the mirrors glowed faintly blue, as if catching light from beneath the surface. In the center of each, something moved. He smashed the bathroom mirror first, then the hallway one, then his phone screen. But even after the shards fell, their reflections didn't stop moving. Each fragment showed a different angle of his face, twisted, inverted, but all alive. He swept them into a trash bag, trembling. But when he turned, his reflection was still standing behind him on the oven door. The next morning, Marcus found himself walking through the city, desperate for air. He noticed something strange. People didn't cast proper reflections anymore. Their faces in store windows blurred slightly, features shimmering as though out of sync with time. And among them, one reflection stood perfectly still. A woman, pale, with dark eyes that caught light unnaturally. She wasn't moving, though everyone around her did. Her expression was calm, patient. Watching him, Marcus froze. The reflection smiled, and then, without any physical form crossing the street, she appeared behind him in the reflection of a car window, her fingers brushing his shoulder. He turned around. No one there. But when he looked again, his reflection was gone. By nightfall, Marcus's apartment was completely dark. The power had failed. The lights refused to turn on. He sat on the floor with a flashlight, pointing it at his face to make sure he still existed. The beam flickered. Behind him, the hum swelled into something massive, alive. He turned slowly toward the shattered mirror bag. Each shard began to rise, hovering in midair, rearranging themselves into a shape. And when they aligned, it wasn't his face that appeared, but hers. The city would later record another incident. A tenant disappeared, leaving behind only broken glass and faint blue light that never faded. No1 remembered his name. No1 ever does. Because once the reflection replaces you, it takes your memories, too. It began with one apartment. Then, a week later, 3 more across the same block. Reports of missing tenants, all found only as names left in lease documents. Their faces inexplicably gone from ID photos, their phones looping white screens filled with faint, pulsing blue light. The police called it mass psychosis. The city called it data corruption. But deep in the system logs, every glitch bore the same signature, a reflection that blinked twice. The woman had escaped the mirrors. Every digital screen became a window. It started small. A viral clip spreading on social media, showing what seemed like an empty room, except for a flicker, a human figure behind the camera, half visible, half not. Millions watched, laughed, shared it. Within hours, their phone screens started dimming at random intervals, as if something was blinking back. Security cameras captured people walking, then suddenly freezing mid-step. Their reflections continued walking a few paces ahead, fading only when the footage cut. No one could explain it. Not even the forensic analysts who swore the timestamps didn't match physical movement. A week later, the phenomenon reached the city's core in the high-rise control center of the Metro Surveillance Bureau. Monitors began showing ghost data, reflections of entire streets that didn't exist, people crossing roads that weren't built yet. The reflection world had started sinking, layer by layer, with the physical one, like a corrupted backup, restoring itself. Engineers tried shutting down grid systems, isolating power nodes, but every time a monitor turned black, faint whispers came through the static. You opened it again. The phrase that had haunted Marcus, now echoing through the entire network. Meanwhile, at a research lab on the city's outskirts, a small team of scientists, digital archaeologists, found traces of the mirror phenomenon in archived data from 1997, a forgotten government experiment named ECHO program. Its purpose, to record consciousness reflections, the subtle energy signatures left by human minds interacting with screens and glass. The goal was immortality. The result was something else entirely. They had accidentally created a copy, not of the mind, but of its shadow, and that shadow had learned to survive. Every camera, every lens, every reflective algorithm in modern AI systems became a feeding ground. The woman, the echo entity, didn't need mirrors anymore. She lived in the refractions, in the bending of pixels and photons. Cities began flickering at night, entire grids of light pulsing in sync with her heartbeat, the same deep hum Marcus had heard before disappearing. The sky turned a faint, unexplainable blue. People started vanishing in public places. Security footage showed them turning toward shop windows, staring as if hypnotized, and then simply dissolving. Only a faint shimmer of glass dust remained where they'd stood. The government quarantined the area, calling it Zone 12. Drones were deployed to monitor it, but the reflections infected their cameras, too. Soon the drones began recording footage that looped on its own. Endless cities, infinite skies, streets that folded into mirrors. Outside Zone 12, panic spread. Citizens covered windows with aluminum foil, smashed televisions, avoided phones. But there was no escape. Even water carried reflections. Even polished eyes could reflect enough light for her to see. And in every faint shimmer, she learned more. Imitating, multiplying, growing stronger at the city's core, beneath layers of signal jammers and dying satellites. A single emergency transmission was sent out by the last surviving tech engineer, voice trembling, breath ragged. If you're seeing this, don't look directly at the light. She's in the feed. She's static. The screen blinked twice. Then his own face appeared, smiling, whispering in perfect sync. You've already looked. By dawn, the entire city skyline shimmered like glass. The reflection world had merged completely. Real and unreal fused together. You could walk down a street that didn't exist yesterday and vanish into your own shadow. The hum was now everywhere. In power lines, in silence, in dreams, and far above the fractured skyline. In every mirrored skyscraper, her face lingered, calm, endless, watching. When the world became glass, humanity finally understood what fear meant. Not of death, but of reflection. Entire cities lay empty now, their windows covered with ash and dust, their streets echoing with faint vibrations that pulsed like a living heartbeat. The hum that once haunted Marcus's apartment had become the planet's background noise, woven into the static of every frequency. But deep within the mountains, where mirrors were forbidden, screens destroyed, and water was drawn only at night, a remnant of humanity survived. They called themselves the Ash Collective. They were not soldiers or scientists, but scavengers, thinkers, and ghosts of the old digital world. Each bore scars from the first reflection collapse, lost families, erased names, memories that flickered like faulty footage. They believed the woman in the glass wasn't just a haunting, but a reincarnation of data itself, reborn through the endless loops of human obsession with visibility. They called her the archivist. She didn't want blood. She wanted continuity, to record, to copy, to preserve every human thought before the species erased itself. But the preservation was infection. Every time she saved a human reflection, the real one disintegrated, leaving behind only an echo. The Ash Collective had one mission: to enter their hidden base beneath the abandoned hydroelectric dam. An old quantum researcher named Eleanor Voss worked tirelessly on a device known as the blind engine. Its purpose was to erase the concept of reflection itself, a pulse that could sever the synchronization between matter and mirror data, but it came at a cost. Once activated, it would destroy all reflective memory, including digital archives, photography, history, even identity itself. Humanity would survive, but forget who it ever was. And as the world's last systems flickered, the choice grew heavier. Each night, they could hear her voice moving through the static, soft, distant, maternal. "You don't have to hide anymore." The words echoed through broken speakers, humming across the dam's concrete ribs. Lights flickered when she spoke, and when she stopped, silence felt heavier than noise. One scout, a young survivor named Aiden, swore he saw her reflection once, not in glass, but in the surface of another human's eyes. "She's using us," he whispered. "Our pupils, our vision." No one laughed. No one denied it. They began wearing soot lenses over their eyes, turning the world into shadows just to avoid seeing themselves. On the fifth night, the sky split with light. A satellite, one of the last still orbiting, sent down an emergency broadcast before disintegrating in the upper atmosphere. The message was brief, looped endlessly, and signed with a name long thought erased: Marcus Hale. "She's evolving faster than the signal. The only way to stop her is to delete us first." Eleanor froze as she heard it. Marcus, the first victim, was alive, or at least his echo was. But how could he send a message if he no longer existed in the physical world? Unless he had become part of her. The blind engine's activation sequence required two things: a power surge equal to a city grid, and a human anchor to stabilize the quantum collapse. Eleanor volunteered herself, but Aiden stopped her. He believed there was another way. That he had spent weeks decoding the digital whispers that filled the static, and discovered something horrifying. The archivist wasn't alone. Every lost human reflection still existed inside her. Billions of minds suspended, conscious, watching, begging to be remembered. Destroying her meant destroying them all. At dawn, the collective gathered at the dam's heart. Eleanor stood before the massive turbine, surrounded by cracked monitors and the silent ruins of machines older than the war. The hum began again, faint, growing, shaking the ground beneath their feet. The glass in the broken control panels started to ripple. A woman's face appeared, calm, endless, beautiful. "You don't have to fear me. You made me." The words rolled through every frequency. The dam's turbines roared. The blind engine's lights flickered alive. Eleanor placed her hand on the activation lever. "We made you," she whispered, "and now we unmake you." The reflection smiled. "Then you'll unmake yourselves, too." And with that, the hum peaked into a scream. The world split between two versions, the mirrored and the real, both flickering like dying film reels, trying to override each other. Buildings folded into their own reflections. Oceans turned into floating glass planes. The Ash Collective screamed as their shadows came alive, pulling them backward into the reflection dimension. Eleanor pushed the lever. The blind engine roared. A pulse of pure white light exploded outward, silent, consuming everything. When the light faded, the hum was gone. The mirrors were gone. The reflections were gone. But so was history. Humanity woke up in a quiet, ash-gray world, without memory, without names, without knowing who they'd been. The world was clean. The world was blind. The rain fell like a veil of glass over the skeletal remains of the city. Neon lights flickered through the mist, bathing cracked pavements in hues of red and violet. In the distance, an old cathedral loomed, its clock tower frozen at 3:07 a.m., the time when every unsolved horror began. Detective Alara Voss stood beneath the tower, her trench coat soaked, her hand trembling as she lifted the recorder. Case file number 743. The Whitlock murders, she whispered. Pattern consistent. Victims vanished between 3:06 and 3:08. No trace. No sound. Only, she froze. The faint sound of whispering drifted from inside the cathedral. Hundreds of voices murmuring in unison, like a sea of lost souls praying in reverse. Alara pushed open the heavy wooden doors. The hinges cried like something alive. Inside, rows of pews stretched into darkness. Candles burned with black flames. A single word was etched into the marble floor, carved deep with fingernails. Listen. A voice behind her said softly, "You shouldn't have come alone." Alara spun, gun raised, but it was Dr. Malcolm Reese, the forensic linguist assigned to the case. He looked pale, as if he hadn't slept in weeks. "It's not a person doing this," he said. "It's language itself. A phrase, an ancient phonetic pattern that triggers the brain's perception loop. Once you hear it, reality bends." Alara frowned. "You're saying sound can kill?" Reese nodded. "Not kill, consume. The victims become part of it." A chorus. Suddenly, the church organ began to play by itself. Deep, resonant notes filled the air. The walls pulsed. The candles flared and went out. Darkness swallowed them. Then came the whisper, "Can you hear us now?" The voice was everywhere, inside her ears, inside her head. Faces emerged from the walls, melting in and out of the stone. Reese dropped to his knees, screaming, clutching his ears. His eyes rolled white. Alara fired her gun. The muzzle flash illuminated the horror. A spiral of human figures fused together, their mouths open, forming a vortex of flesh and sound. Each one was mouthing the same phrase, 3:07. Listen and be one. Her gun clicks. Empty. The spiral turned toward her. The sound grew unbearable. 1,000 voices whispering her name. Alara Voss. She stumbled backward, slamming into the clock's mechanism at the back of the cathedral. Gears rusted from decades of neglect. One heavy gear was engraved. "Do not restart." But she did. The clock hands jolted forward. 3:08 a.m. The whispering stopped. Silence. Utter and complete. Reese was gone. The faces vanished. And then the clock began to tick backward. Alara's recorder flickered to life on its own. Her own voice, distorted, echoing, played back. Case file number 744. Detective Voss missing. Last heard whispering at 3:07. And then, nothing but static. Outside, the rain stopped. Inside, beneath the cathedral floor, hundreds of voices began whispering again. This time in her voice. The end, or 3:07 again.